But what a big decision to leave. You're talking about uprooting your entire life, everything you know, walking away from your friends, your comfort, your car, your routine, your life. And then you start playing tricks in your mind of, is it really bad enough? Really? To leave? To do this to my own life? To blow up my life? Is it really that bad? You start to gaslight yourself.
It's not always possible if you're in a toxic relationship for you to leave. Well, today, Lisa Sonni joins me to talk about what to do if you're a survivor of a narcissistically abusive relationship. How do you survive and keep your sanity intact? So many times, Lisa, I get asked, what about if I can't leave, that I'm stuck in this relationship, that I don't have a way out? Maybe there's no financial means, like maybe this person doesn't have any skilled education, or there's nowhere to go. Maybe they're in a country where they literally can't get out of, and there aren't the kind of resources for themselves for whatever reason. Maybe it's a disability, maybe it's due to their gender, maybe it's due to their religion, but they are stuck in this relationship. First of all, let's start with, do you see this problem, and how often do you think it is a big problem?
I definitely see this problem. I think more so in the comment sections. I see across all my platforms where people are talking about, but I can't leave because. And the reasons vary. I think some people are genuinely stuck. I think more than people realize, they think they're stuck. Because I have to be honest, on my pages, what I see is the most common reason for not being able to leave is having children with the abuser. I can't leave because we share kids.
I also, though, see it, I can't leave because I don't know what else to do. I see a lot of hopelessness or helplessness. As a person with a real strong religious belief that came from a community that believed that marriage was the answer and that divorce wasn't, and that there was something wrong with divorce, I also felt like it cost me socially, that it would ruin my reputation. So I do think there are other things that kind of impact a person's ability to leave. I'm thinking back, there are people who have nowhere to go. What do you do when your family won't take you back? You don't have any money. This person's been financially abusing you. Maybe even you have kids, so that there's another piece that it's not just trying to budget for you, but you're budgeting for a family. You can feel really profoundly stuck in these relationships. And I have noticed, and I'm sure you have too, that there's a bias that leaving is the only answer, and that there's actually something essentially wrong with you if you cannot leave.
Yes.
There's you're flawed, you're weak or something.
Yeah. I think financial issues aside, because there's a certain level of stuckness when it's a financial problem. But I find when it's the emotional side of things, people act like, just leave. I don't understand. Go sleep on a friend's couch. Go to a shelter. There's options. Sure. That's the logistical piece of where you're going to sleep that night, perhaps. Though I would argue making a decision to go sleep at a shelter, if you have pets, if you have children, if you live in a small town where that's not even an option, there are no shelters, or the shelters in your city are full, but what a big decision to leave. You're talking about uprooting your entire life, everything you know, walking away from your friends, your comfort, your car, your routine, your life. And then you start playing tricks in your mind of, is it really bad enough? Really? To leave? To do this to my own life? To blow up my life? Is it really that bad? You start to gaslight yourself.
Oh, yeah. I was in Mexico. I wasn't fluent, trying to run a business in Mexico in Spanish. And there was no family there. I had a few friends, but they're not going to handhold me and walk me up into, say, the internet store to try to pay for my account. I'm going to have to navigate that alone. How do you do that when you can't even speak the language of the country that you're in? And then getting out, okay, so how do I do that? How do I pack up a house and move? And move where? Where do I move in the United States? Do I toss a coin and then see where it lands? And at the time, I just recently was sharing with you, I was cash poor. People would have said, yeah, you're wealthy, but I can't access the money. So what am I supposed to do then? So I'm going to go into a new town with no money to my name, with a few suitcases, and to do what?
Where do you even begin? It's so
I
overwhelming.
know. So people are like, well, just leave. Leave to where? Leaving to me was one of the hardest things I have ever done. Not even just at an emotional level. It was hard at a practical level.
Yes.
I was terrified, and he was threatening me too. So that's the other component, is people don't appreciate these people threaten you with real risks, real losses. He was threatening to take half of everything I was worth that I'd brought into that country that he had no right to. And then what am I going to do then? Then here I am, a woman heading into the last parts of my life, and I don't want to go back to work. And he's forcing me to have to go back to work full time. And I shouldn't have had to because he wanted it. Even that made me so angry. The unfairness of that. There's a lot of people, though, weren't even in my position that they don't have there is no money. There's never been any money. They've been with this person their entire life, and this person made decisions that have preempted them from having any money.
Yeah.
And now we're telling them, okay, start over at 55. Sorry about that. Sorry you'll never get to retire. But the right thing, the mature thing, the emotionally brave thing is to start over.
Yeah, but it's huge. I think not enough people talk about just how big that is. This whole just leave. I mean, I have an entire playlist on TikTok called Just Leave. It is the hardest thing. I know for me, I was facing threats and it was the pandemic. I was unemployed due to the pandemic. I suddenly started finding out that there was no money. I thought we had money, gone, all of it, every penny, more than every penny. And even when I borrowed money, he stole it. I mean, every opportunity. When I tried to leave, he physically harmed me. He threatened me in every way possible. So it was not a matter of, oh, it's so easy, just leave. And I know that some people either can't leave right now and need to sort of navigate staying short term, or really don't know how they're ever going to leave, or have accepted that they need to stay for whatever reason. And it's so easy for people on the outside to judge the reason, but nobody teaches people how to stay. I get why. I have an emotional response to that. It feels like, why on earth would I teach you how to stay in the worst situation that's harming you? It's not going to get better. I can't teach you to make it work. So it feels like the opposite of what I aspire to give people, which is this courage and the skills, the resources, the internal resources to leave. So staying seems wild to me, but yet so many people are in that situation.
It feels like to me, we're saying to somebody who's in a prison, that's what it feels like, is that you're in a form of a prison that it literally is wearing you out, wearing you down, and going to shorten your life. Let's just be really honest. It's going to shorten your life because it's going to create some kind of autoimmune response, or you're not going to have the care, the love, the whatever that you need to stay as the healthiest you could possibly be. And for most of us, we think this prison's door is open, that actually that the lock on it isn't working and that you could actually just open up and leave. Maybe it isn't always open, though. Not for everybody. I think that's a false assumption to say you're in a prison with an open door, you just refuse to walk through it. But for some people, we have to help them figure out how to survive the prison, if that's your situation. And I hope that it's not. I hope those listening have an open door. They just don't know how to fully walk through that door. I mean, I've actually heard at the end of the Holocaust, sometimes in some places the armies had left the concentration camp and people still stayed because they'd gotten used to that state, because they didn't know what to do if they walked off the place, because at least they figured the rules out to this crazy environment. And I do think that I'm not saying we're not the same. I'm not trying to minimize what that horrible thing was, but I do think sometimes we don't see we have more opportunities than we think that we do. But for some, there isn't. They're in the prison and the door is locked. I think we have to shift your mindset to surviving. You're not going to necessarily thrive, but you can survive. For me, if I had to stay, I think the biggest thing I would have had to start working on is to reduce the degree that I look to this person for answers and the degree that I counted on this person emotionally, that I really had wrapped myself up around wanting this person's approval and hoping that somehow I could make him, and I'm not speaking of men specifically, but in my case, it was a man, him healthier so that then the situation was healthier. That I would have to change my mindset, realizing I'm not going to make this person healthier. That's not possible.
Yeah, they're not changing. I always say you need to change. They're not going to change. You can't influence them. You can't control them. So staying is never going to be, how do I stay and make them treat me better? That's not going to be treated badly. Just that's step one, is accept that. But how do you survive? And I know that there's a lot of detachment that needs to happen. You really need to learn how to self-validate, build up who you are. I know in Dr. Ramani's book, Should I Stay or Should I Go? Chapter 7 is about staying. The whole chapter's devoted to what that would be like and how you really need to accept that this is going to happen and maybe try to have some mundane conversations. You're never going to share your excitement with them or share your pain with them because they'll become weapons against you.
Yeah. When I started thinking about it, I realized that I had to think through, is this something that this person needs to know? Instead of, before I would say, I really want this person to share this with me because this is something really cool and exciting and it means a lot to me. But I had to start thinking strategically instead of thinking intimately. And that's a really big shift, to realize that I'm living with an enemy and that I have to trust this person with a lot of care and cautiousness. There is no trust here. And I don't think we like that. I don't think we like a proximity with somebody when there isn't trust.
It's absolutely true. You're sleeping beside the enemy, quite literally, if it's a romantic relationship. That's what I felt like. But even in staying, I find, let's say you learn how to emotionally detach and you self-validate, or you have a life that's outside of them. You're still sleeping beside the enemy. And there's still expectations in a romantic relationship. And I know for me, as I was trying to detach, I was realizing that there was still this expectation that there was physical intimacy. And it was like, you're a stranger, or worse, you're an enemy. We're at war, and you still expect me to give into the relationship. So when I say staying is hard, right? We all know just how hard that can be and what sacrifices sometimes get made to stay.
Yeah, I think when I look at relationships, I categorize people. This is a person that I can do fun things with. This is a person who's really great to travel with. This is a person who's really great to vent to. This person gives the most amazing advice. And do you think that we can learn to categorize this romantic relationship in the same way? This is a person that I may be physically intimate with, but I'm not going to be emotionally intimate with.
Yes, I think that some people can do that, and I think some people can do it easier than others. I struggle with that. Not having an emotional connection is strange for the purposes of physical intimacy. I know that's not true for everybody, but for me, that's kind of, they go hand in hand. But again, you need to disassociate in order to survive in the relationship. So I was doing that as infrequently as I could, but my body was not processing that in a healthy way at all. It was traumatizing.
Yeah, I hear that. I do think some people probably compartmentalize a little easier than others. That might be doable for some and not doable for others. I'll tell you what would have been a sticking point for me, that I know that ongoing betrayals were continuing to happen. That if I stayed in this relationship, particularly if I emotionally detached, he's going to be rampantly cheating, which then creates a whole nother question of, I don't want to be physically intimate with somebody who's cheating on me because he's risking STDs for me, or STI. And yes, that absolutely, he was endangering me. And so I had to consider what I was going to do about that danger. So I think that's the other piece, is that if this is just one of many ways they endanger us financially. They make crappy financial decisions, or decisions that are so self-centered that you're not being cared for or considered. The other thing is they're actively lying and deceiving you. So what you probably don't actually know what really is. Like, what really is happening in this person's work life. Are they actually going to work? Are they really bringing home all the money and putting it into the bank account like they say that they are? We have all these things that we get really dependent on. So for me, living with the fact that I know that there are ongoing betrayals was really hard. I think I would have had to approach this as if we're roommates, essentially. That I was in a same house with someone, sharing some things with this person, in a sense I'm thinking maybe some joint accounts, certainly kids, things like that. But I would also have to see this as there's a level of separateness too, that I cannot merge my life. They're not safe that way.
Yeah. The roommates thing, he used to say that, actually, that we're just roommates. But that had more to do with the lack of physical intimacy. He would say, like, we're just roommates. And I almost considered that. I mean, maybe not so consciously, but yeah, it does feel that way. I don't get intimate with my roommate, so I wonder if this can kind of transition into that. But the risk was that, yeah, he was out sleeping around, and that hurts. You're trying to stay and make it work, and this person is lying to you actively. But I think it's Dr. Ramani that said this, that staying in a narcissistic relationship means accepting that they're never going to change, and you have to find ways to kind of safeguard your own health, your own mental health.
Right. So what do you think that would have looked like for you? I would have had to learn how to be more assertive. And in some places to create more conflict, because I needed to really watch out for my end. I would have had to start to see the way in which he was being deceptive and manipulative financially. Like, for example, one of the was that he wanted to carry cash instead of using a credit card and checkbook. He just felt that was it. And the me today looks back and think this is hilarious. How come I not really see it for what it was? He wanted no record. He wanted to be able to spend cash that wasn't traceable. But at the time, I had heard of the cash method. I'd use it at a group home, and it made sense. It's a nice, convenient way. You put stuff in an envelope, and you put the receipts as you replace the money. Whatever you buy, you put the receipts in. At the end of the month, there's what you show what you spent in that category, whatever. So I was kind of thinking of that, not realizing this person was my best interest at all. This is all about how he could cheat me in some new way. So
and getting the receipts, no doubt.
Sure. No, they never showed up in that envelope. But we'd have to get better at seeing through that so that you could shut it down. Okay, so what it would have cost me to have been able to say to him, sorry, I'm not doing a cash system. This makes no sense. Why would I do that? That's stupid. I would prefer that we do credit card to have some record, but that meant then I would have had to go into a debate with him. Then I would have had to, he would keep bringing it up. Like he always loved to keep that water dripping thing. Just keep bringing it up over and over and over, hoping that somehow there's going to be a new answer to this same shit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it means sort of learning how to survive that kind of ongoing pressure, manipulation.
That's why, so easy to say this, right? But you need really strong boundaries, but like the strongest you could possibly ever imagine. Because as you were describing that financial thing, even in my relationship specific to finances, I can imagine there were things that I wanted to say no to. We had a business together, which is ultimately the largest source of what drained us financially. And I was like, yes, let's do it the entire time, because no, in hindsight, right, no would have cost me too much. He would have absolutely pressured me, screamed at me, told me I was too stupid to understand that this needed to happen, so that throwing good money after bad, right? You keep just investing. But for him, it was like, but if you don't, then you lose everything. What's wrong with you? I know that mentality of just continually throwing money down the toilet. Eventually, it's going to catch up to you. But he was much more it's going to be my comeback if we just get this one more loan, but the pressure, it would have been absolutely relentless verbal abuse, screaming, finding loopholes, finding ways to do it without me, forged signatures. I've dealt with a lot. So when I said no, he found workarounds. So there was no saying no. So even when I think about, I would have had to have had really strong boundaries, there are ones that I literally would not been able to have had. I would have had to have been stealing money from us. And I was the breadwinner. I'm not talking about stealing his money. I'm talking about our money that was in a joint account. I would have had to have been shifting that and saying that I was spending it on something else and hiding money, which in hindsight, I wish I had done. But I feel like he would have noticed. I feel like I didn't have a lot of options, but you need to have really strong boundaries and know what the consequences are. You need to maybe be a little bit sneaky, a little bit manipulative, which I can feel really awful. Like, well, we're both manipulative and we're both doing this to each other. But the intention, which is invisible, but the intention is so important, that you're trying to stay safe financially, emotionally, physically, perhaps. And they're trying to be exploitative, and the intention is for control. Yours is to regain your own control, not to control another person. So knowing the difference and having enough of a sense of self to recognize that your motivations are different, so you don't see yourself in a negative light. There's a lot that has to be done.
There is a lot, and a lot of things that most victims are terribly uncomfortable with doing. I would have found that extremely hard. I would have felt like I had become as toxic as he had been. And then maybe in some ways, from an outside perspective, I would have looked pretty toxic. But I agree. I would have had to realize this person didn't have my back. They couldn't be trusted. They weren't looking out for my best interest. And that if I didn't, he was going to have drained everything out of me, because he was moving from idea to idea. Let's spend money on this new idea, this new business idea. Let's go over here. This would be great. And I'm thinking, you're not running the pros and the cons. There's no way you're going to want to do this business with the kind of hours it's going to require and the kind of supervision. And I don't see that kind of organization out of you. And you think we're going to invest another X amount of money over this for something there's no way you have in you to see it through. And I don't want to do it. It's not my baby. I have no interest in doing this. But to fight with that over and over, or to figure out a strategy, here's what I found that really helps, though. And I think that's important for us to give some suggestions, just practical suggestions. I found that if I just listened and didn't act, that I just acted bland, and I didn't engage in the argument, but I also didn't I wasn't antagonistic. I just was, oh, that's interesting. And then just let it pass by me, that I noticed that he was impulsive enough that he would jump to another topic. Yeah, he'd come back to it because he needed my push, my determination, my willingness to sort of help him take the next step. And if I'd never helped him, then that next step never got taken. It's sort of like the person oh, I need to go see a therapist. And what does the partner do? Oh, we go find the therapist for them. If I didn't do that work, then sometimes I didn't get hurt because he didn't do it himself either.
I wish that was true for me. Mine had the motivation to
Did
do
he? Oh.
things without me. Absolutely. And he only ever would ask me if I was an absolutely necessary part of the process, but that's where he would be relentlessly strong in coming at me with all of the reasons. Like, no conversation can take place until that is resolved. Did you sign it? Did you do it? Is it done? Incessantly. So you cave. But to have a stronger sense of myself, what I would have done was go into therapy, which is interesting because I did. And that's a whole other topic, but I did go into therapy and it was not at the time helpful. But if I had recognized the need to have a sense of self in a relationship that I know is, let's call it bad as opposed to abusive, because you may not recognize that at the time. And how can I stop caring so much about the names that he calls me and the way that he makes me feel about myself? That's what I would have done. Really focus on self-validation and self-worth, but in the face of being constantly told something negative. But I also think the more you do that, you may overcome the reason that you're staying to begin with. Because I think that, oversimplified perhaps, but we stay because of a lack of sense of self. So if you work on that to stay, you may leave. If that's the thing that's keeping you.
Yeah, but my other thought is they may leave.
Fair,
They may
which,
find- They may find you so frustrating, you're like, crap, I can't take this, I'm out of here.
Yeah, I can't control you anymore.
I know. And is that necessarily a bad thing? Maybe not. It depends on how they leave you. I mean, if it puts you into a terribly financial position or some other thing, I mean, you lose a place to live, that could be a really bad thing. But you're right. And this is the real risk, too. I think we should be honest about that. The real risk of getting healthy is that it'll lead you to a breakup.
Right. Whether they leave or you leave. And I find it interesting if you have, and I've seen this many times, where you start therapy, you start, figuring out how to detach and not let their words affect you, and you're doing what you need to do, you're building in self-care, you're starting some boundaries, and then they leave you and you're desperate for them to come back.
Yeah.
I've been there, so I'm laughing at myself. I have been in exactly that shoes. It's wild that it's almost like you want them to leave. I've had clients say in my coaching, how do I get him to leave me? That's what I want. And the truth is, we can do that work. How you can get them to leave is building a sense of self and not being able to be controlled anymore, because they'll take everything they can from you. And then once there's no more to take, they'll leave. And no more to take, meaning either they've taken everything and you feel completely drained now, or you've built up something strong in you where they can't take from you anymore. Then they don't need you anymore.
Right. Well, that's exactly what happened in my case. The moment I set a boundary, a really firm one, and I didn't cave and I didn't act scared and I started doing stuff without his permission, he literally the next day was gone. He fled. So I do think that you're right, is that when we find our own strength, it is a changed dynamic. And this is something you learn in graduate school if you study family systems theory or you study family theory, is that your relationship as an organism in itself is also a living entity. It's a presence. And when one piece, and think of it, if your foot suddenly gets broken, the whole body then gets affected. Even the way you walk, where you carry your pain, it affects what you're going to do, how it affects your day, actually you can practically do and not do. The same thing happens with us in a relationship with a person. If one person changes, it changes the dynamics of the entire organization or the unit or the family, for example. So if somebody gets super strong and you start setting limits, that has repercussions for the other people. They're going to have to then do something with that. And people who are narcissistic, who you take away their sense of control, because that's how they're managing how insecure they feel, that shakes them up. They don't like that they're going to do something to either get you to go back to the way it was, or they're going to go to something that feels more safe and familiar to them. I know that's not the goal. People aren't looking to necessarily chase their partner out. But I think what we're saying is that the biggest way through this is that you have to really, really focus on yourself. You have to become your own project, not the relationship. And there's the biggest shift. People usually come in initially in any type of a counseling or coaching relationship wanting us to help them make the relationship better. But the goal is we have to shift our focus from the relationship to ourselves.
Absolutely. Mental healness, Lee Hammock, his wife, has said that it's difficult, right? Obviously being married to a narcissist, but the way that she handles it, and I'm not talking about his progress or his change or anything. I'm talking about her. She talks about how she has to have a strong sense of who she is. So she focuses her own therapy on herself, her own regulation, her own coping skills, how to have firm boundaries, so that she doesn't need that from him. That's living proof that exactly what we're saying is working for someone who is staying.
Yeah, exactly. So I would love to follow this up with you in the podcast extra. This is what I want to talk about over there. I want to talk to you about sometimes we think we can't leave, and really it is, and I hate this terminology, but I'm going to use it anyway, learned helplessness. So let's talk about, is it really a part of the trauma bond, which creates this sense of, I can't leave, I've become dependent, I'm nothing, I'm a nobody, and really with a lot of imposter syndrome, versus when it really is practically can't leave. So let's talk about that and help people figure out which is which. But thank you so much for talking about this topic. It is so underrepresented that I find it concerning, but I know it is. I bet you at least 10% of the population that I talk to is in this position.
Agreed.
And I know. And we really need to be saying more about it, because it's cruel for us to say, sorry, there's no help because of this situation. Maybe we think you made a decision. Maybe really there isn't a decision, but we're going to act it like it's your fault when it really may not be at all.
Well, that's a wrap for this week's episode. Are you following me on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube? Find me at Kerry McAvoy, Ph.D. Now you don't need to wait a week to get your next podcast fix. Join Breaking Free from Narc Abuse at Substack.com to get exclusive audio content for subscribers. To sign up, click the link in the show notes. And whether you're in, consider leaving, or have left a narcissistic relationship, find community support at my Toxic Free Relationship Club. You can learn about this resource as well as others at KerryMcAvoyPhD.com. And I'll see you back here next week.